Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hey, welcome to Life Support. So good to have you here. What we do on this program is we tell stories to help you find a deeper relationship with Jesus through suffering and trauma. And that may seem like a contradiction in terms, but it's not. Because many times God makes himself known in unique ways when we are in a pain of some kind or grieving or suffering. That's when God really shows up. And we have a guest that's going to be proof of that today. Josh Bogacek is our guest. You may have met him last week. But Josh, thanks for being back. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, you told us a story that was difficult, heartbreaking. You lost some very important people.
Yeah.
Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, so my wife, who was 32 weeks pregnant, had gone over to a friend's house to help them move, and I was at work at the time and got a phone call from the friend that Mallory had been in an accident at the house, and the ambulance was taking her to the hospital, but she was going to be okay. She was going to make it, so I rushed to the hospital from work, and I'm at the hospital, and I'm waiting, and some doctors had come in, and I had prepared myself for some pretty hard news, but the news that they had shared with me was something that I could have never imagined. They told me that Mallory, my wife, had passed away. They weren't able to save her, but they were able to save our daughter, our baby at the time. So they brought her up to the NICU, and she was up there, and they didn't know how much time was left for her, but she was alive and she was there, and I had the opportunity to meet her and spend 4 days with her in the hospital, and those are 4 days that forever changed my life, and are days that I will share about for the rest of my life. So.
Yeah, well, that's something that we all think about, but we think is never going to happen to us.
Right.
And now it's happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're a believer.
Yeah.
You know Jesus. How important was it at this point in your life that you had invested in your faith?
Yeah.
When all this struck you?
Right. Yeah, I say this a lot, and when anyone asks that question, how did you make it through? How did you get through this? I tell them it was my faith, and it was my relationship with Jesus. Because if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would have ended up. I probably would have spiraled into a deep depression and all of these different things, which a lot of people told me was fine to do. If you need to just unwind and spiral, you're the person, you're a great candidate to do that. But for me, that wasn't an option, because I knew that I had a lot more living to do in Christ. So.
Are there any specific things, Bible verses, theology that came to mind as you maneuvered through this?
Yeah, this might be unconventional.
We're an unconventional show. That's what makes us so much fun.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me that I struggled with was, at first, why did God take my wife from me? That was my biggest struggle. If God's good, why did he take my wife? And so I bought a lot of theology books and just different versions of the Bible, different translations, and I studied and studied and studied. And I never once found in Scripture where God would take a spouse. Because he's a good God, and he wants the best for you in your life. And I knew that, but at the time I was like, he took her and my daughter, and
it's an undeniable fact, right?
Absolutely.
You have to deal with it.
Yeah, and no matter how much studying I did and diving into different things, I could just never find where he would take someone or a spouse or something like that. For me, at least, I couldn't find that anywhere. So that really kind of started to put my heart and my mind at ease. That, yes, she's with God in heaven now. He didn't take her from me, but she's there now and healed and whole and with Jesus.
So he's not a vindictive God.
Absolutely.
Is kind of where you landed.
Yep.
Knowing that she was with God in heaven, what did that do to your spirit?
Still till
and your baby.
Yeah, still till this day, knowing that promise we have in heaven is what I cling to, and is what I encourage a lot of people who go through a loss like that, who knows that they're the person that they lost is in heaven. I always try to remind them that they're healed and they're whole, and it's still okay to grieve and to process all these different things, but just know that they are in the best place ever. And a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear that right away, but just knowing that, for me at least, continues to strengthen my faith and strengthen.
It's a really important truth. Now, what you don't want to do if you're dealing with somebody who's grieving is necessarily, hey, it's going to be okay, they're in heaven, because the relationships in heaven are going to be different. You've lost something that's very precious.
For sure.
But I remember a friend telling me after I lost my wife, and I was kind of beating myself up, and I wish I would have been this kind of husband. I wish I would have done better when she was fighting cancer. You know how that goes. And a friend just looked at me and said, she's not thinking about that right now.
Yeah.
She's with Christ.
Right.
You're not responsible for her anymore.
Yeah.
So you can let that go. Yeah. I think she's doing fine. And actually that was really an important truth. And when we lost our son, he was young. And so my first question was, well, I know he's made a profession of faith. I baptized him. But, how does this really work? Because he was young and he made mistakes and stuff. Right. And I remember, God would give us these little conversations with his friends, and they would be sporadic, and they would say things like, Taylor and I talked about Jesus a lot. Yeah. Or you run into some camp counselor 2 years later, and they'd be going like, yeah, I had this conversation, and it was just like confirmation. Right. And it was like God circling around, just saying, well, I'm going to keep reminding you. Yeah. And I think one thing we've lost in the modern day church is, in the old days, they sang about heaven a lot. The old gospel songs, right? That we all kind of like, well, we don't do that anymore. Yeah. But a lot of them were about, we're going to glory. Yes. We're going to heaven. Right. And I feel sometimes that we've lost that hope. Yeah. Because it is a very real thing. Yeah. And you say you're still clinging to that. You still think about that.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I was, like I said last week, I was a missionary, and my whole life was sharing this hope of what heaven is. And so if I was preaching it to thousands and thousands of people, but in my everyday life, if I wasn't believing it, then I'm a hypocrite. And I just kept being reminded of conversations that I had where I shared about Jesus and how, loving he is and how he wants this relationship with you, and how the ultimate goal at the end is that we get to live in eternity with him. And that, still to this day, it's just every morning I remind myself of that promise. And it's very important for me as I continue in my life, as I continue on this journey, that we have that hope, and that's something that I cling to more than anything.
Yeah, and that hope is also a future hope for you, and for your new wife and your child, if I might call them that. But because I remember a lady saying to me, "Well, after your wife died, I thought you'd get a free pass or get out of jail card, and then this thing happened with your son, and then, well, there's no guarantees of anything in life, right?" And that's why I think it's important that we keep our theology straight, and we know what we believe, and we cling to it. Yeah. And then you're in a situation now where you're all alone. You all the hopes of your life, everything you thought was going to happen was suddenly gone. Yeah. How did you deal with the loneliness, that the isolation that comes with laying there in the dark? I know what that feels like. You lay in the dark. Kind of closes in on you because now you're thinking about it. It's just it can be a really dark, horrible feeling. What did you do to kind of counteract that?
Yeah. Yeah. As you know, there was those sleepless nights where
Man.
you just lay in the bed, and no matter how tired you were from crying the day of, or all these spiritual things that are going on in your life, you're just exhausted at night, but you just lay there, and like you said, you just feel that darkness, and there's no sleep, there's no rest. At least for me, there wasn't, and that was probably for a good week or two after everything happened. But it wasn't really anything I did. It was what the people around me did. They were intentional. They were active in this healing process and this grieving process. And there wasn't a day where I was by myself. Never. I can't even remember how long. It was that long. I had friends meeting with me every day, just like sharing stories and, laughing about things that happened and crying and all of these different things. I never once had a day where I didn't have someone coming to sit with me, and my family was there and super supportive of everything, and all of my friends that were here were just there and active and pursuing me. And I remember a couple of friends and I took a trip up to Duluth, Minnesota, and we just hung out, and it was like 20 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds, and it was the worst day in Duluth, but for me it was one of the best days because of the time we had together where we could share these stories about Mallory and all of these different things, and also share about that there is hope for the future for me. And so there wasn't anything that I did. Like I said, I did seek counseling, and that helped tremendously, but just the intentionality of my friends and my family during that time is what really got me.
That's a great lesson for all of us to learn, because so many times what happens, people are all there at the beginning of the journey, right. Getting through the service, yep. Coming in, flying in, and so forth.
Yep.
And then when it's over, many times, everyone leaves, and then that person really, really has a hard time. So your friends were good.
Yeah.
And that's a good lesson for all of us to learn.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we don't do well in churches, is that we tend to judge a lot.
Yep.
So here you are now. You're in this grieving process. You begin to kind of, this girl comes on your radar, and in our minds, we all have, well, what's proper and what we should do or not do, and how are we going to not honor your wife and all this stuff.
Right.
So how did you work through the reality that this woman was starting to be like the real deal, and you must have asked yourself some questions?
For sure.
How did you kind of maneuver through that whole thing?
Yeah, well, I was terrified.
That's a good thing. You should always be terrified.
I was absolutely, I dreaded having to tell anyone that there's potentially a new...
What were you afraid of?
I think I was afraid of, their reaction, yes, mostly because my friends were Mallory's friends. Like, all of our friends were super close, and we had this amazing community, as I've talked about. And I didn't want to dishonor them because they were alongside me, and this girl now comes into my life, and I'm all of these thoughts of, well, are you still honoring these people? Are you still honoring Mallory? Are you still doing the right thing? And a friend of mine kept reminding me that there's no manual or handbook on grief. We have the stages of grief and all of those different things.
But they come at different times and different places.
100%. Yep. And there's no book that says, hey, in 2 weeks you need to be here. Right. And then you need to be there. And that's what I kept reminding myself of is I felt good about this. I felt really like, okay, this woman is amazing, and I could see myself being with her. But is that my flesh, or is that from the Lord? And I asked him and wrestled with it, and just continually felt like it was okay. But I was still very scared to talk to my friends and family about it. And like I had mentioned, I just kind of sucked it up, and I told them about her and said that I really feel like this is from the Lord. What are your thoughts? And they were all surprisingly accepting and surprisingly just, yeah, we're here for you. We really think like this is good. And well, when they first met Amanda, there was that awkward,
Sure.
just like,
For everybody,
it's just new.
Because they had not seen you with anyone else.
Right. It's different. It's new. And Mallory was this amazing person. And now I'm with this other person. And there's probably those thoughts of, wow, this is too soon. How is he still, doing this? Does he just need a wife because he, had this sense of belonging and compassion with this other, with Mallory, and now he's just looking to replace that.
Yep.
And I never felt like that. I really just felt like this was good and really felt like this was what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that many times we look at people in our spheres of influence and we want to kind of dictate how they grieve and how they work through issues, when in fact that's between them and God. And supporting is the best thing. Yeah. Listening, just being present, yeah. And if you're asked, be honest.
Yeah.
But you talk often, Josh, about getting counsel.
Yeah.
Tell me how important that is to you, that you're running stuff by believers and that you're not making these decisions on your own.
Yeah. It's the utmost of important things for me. Whenever there's something going on in my life, God put these people in my life very strategically. Not all of them agree or believe every single thing that I do, and I think that's amazing because you need those people that have different thought processes, that process things differently, that want what's best for you ultimately, but maybe there's different ways to get there,
right,
and that are different from my mind. So I think having those people that the end goal is always the same, but it's how do we get there? How do we get this healing? How do we, answer this prayer? How do we, do all these different things? I think having multiple people in your life that do that is crucial and is very important. And thankfully, I had a lot of those people and still have them. Whenever a hard thing comes up, I can reach out and they're always there saying, hey, we're praying for you. What can we do? Let us know how it goes. If you want to meet with us, we can sit down and process this together. So yeah, that's
a really good gift to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a wonderful thing to bring to your young adult ministry that you're just starting out on.
Yeah.
Hey, build people into your life that will walk the journey with you.
Yep.
I mean, I'm older than Abraham, and I still have mentors around the country that I know who to call,
right,
and I know they're going to give me the straight shoot, the straight shot, because they love me enough to tell me,
right,
you're crazy. Or what's beautiful about it is if your counselors, your mentors give you the green light, then you can walk forward in confidence.
Yeah.
And on those hard days when you're going like, wow, this is really difficult. Yeah. Oh yeah, wait, they said it. They said this was the right thing. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you don't have to be second guessing yourself all the time. All right, so here you are. We got about 3 minutes, and now you're married. You've got a child.
Yeah.
If you could just narrow it down, I know it's impossible questions, but I like asking impossible questions, because if you had to narrow it down to one or two things that you think about when you think about God right now, and you think about where you've been and where you are.
Yeah.
What kind of terms would you use?
So I'll say two. There's hundreds, but the top two for me are pursuit and I guess I could just tag them together. Active pursuit. So I have always felt actively pursued by the Lord. So when I went through my loss, there was never a day where I didn't feel like God was trying to pursue me. And, getting remarried and having a baby and all these different things, I still feel pursued. And as I walk into this young adults ministry where, I'm at the moment a little in over my head. I don't have all these answers. I don't really know, it's a rural community and I'm from the city. Like, what do these people need? I don't know. But anytime that I'm in a quiet time, or anytime I'm, driving, the Lord's always reminding me that He's pursuing me, and He's going to, answer these questions, and He's going to help me with whatever it is. And yeah, I don't know. Every single day, I'm just amazed by this active pursuit from the Lord that I have, or that He has for me, and it's
all about grace.
It's amazing.
And when you think about the young adults you'll be ministering to, that's really all they need is, they don't need someone with all the answers. They just need someone to love them, someone to pursue them.
Right.
And what I find is that in ministry, people aren't so much interested in what you know. They just want to know that you are involved with their life, that you do care about them, and that you're willing to share some of your stuff.
Right.
So they have some freedom to not be perfect.
Yeah.
So you're going to do great. You got a lot of wisdom.
Thank you.
You've come through a lot. You have a lot to share. And don't you find, Josh, that because of what you've gone through, that you have sort of instant credibility with people?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. Yeah, It's something that I definitely feel like I have some authority in the Lord to address certain situations, and
And they look at you different, don't they? When you start sharing, they kind of go like, oh, this isn't just some holy man here trying to steer me around. This guy has been through some stuff, and they listen.
Right.
Because they genuinely are interested in what you have to say to them, and that's a gift too.
Yeah. I remember going to a church kind of freshly after everything happened, and I didn't know everyone, but I walked in that building, and I had this sense that everyone knew me. Not in an arrogant way, but I just knew that they knew my story. They knew kind of where I'm at, and I still have that sometimes when I go to fresh and new places. And I think that's just the Lord reminding me that I have something powerful to share, and that I need to share of His goodness and all of that. So,
keep doing it.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing it with us.
For sure.